I'm Diana Ideas, Master Certified Coach with Hawthorne Union. As we approach April 1st, 2025, the International Coaching Federation will be releasing the revised ICF ethics. So, the ethics is what we pledge to and align by as internationally credentialed coaches. So, it's a few days before April 1st. So, you can access those revised ICF ethics at Hawthorne Union's resource page. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then as soon as the ICF updates their site with the ethics, which I believe will likely be April 1st, 2025, I'll go ahead and update those links in the show notes. So this presentation is a condensed version of ethics without the eye rolls, real world coaching dilemmas in 2025. So it's a preview of the changes in the ethics, but it's also some things to think about because what Jason Spector, who designed this deck and also who created Hawthorne Union's Gray Areas Ethics for Coaches, found is that some of the gray areas of ethics or the challenges that we face in ethics as coaches were not necessarily covered in programs. Sometimes, unfortunately, I think our programs teach us how to coach, but don't necessarily teach us how to operate in the business world. What do our contracts look like? What does confidentiality look like? How does confidentiality change if you have a sponsor? How does confidentiality change if you're an internal coach versus an external coach? That's a lot for your program, regardless of how good your program is to cover, which is part of why part of the ICF ethics is for us to commit to continuing education. But we find that often ethics classes are not as riveting or edge of the seat as you would like them to be. So it's a shout out to Jason and the content that he's created and designed, which I'll summarize for you today, where we try to make this really engaging so that we're learning together as coaches, but also acting in better ethical alignment. So if you are part of a group of coaches, a community of coaches, whether that's at a company or at a chapter, and you would like for us to come present this to you, of course, let us know, reach out to us. This is a summary of what we presented to the International Coaching Federation Los Angeles chapter in March of 2025. So we're happy to host this discussion with you and your group or your chapter, though also as of April 1st, 2025, the ICF will likely have resources. There's an ethics hotline, there's an ethics board. So know that there are continued resources out there for you to make sure that you're aligned with the revised ethics, but that also you have safe spaces as coaches to continue to develop. Okay, so a preview of the changes. We want to make sure that coaches feel equipped and are able to cover situations that aren't covered in coaching schools, having practical strategies for the digital age. There's technology that's changed that wasn't in play last time the ethics were written. Understanding how to protect both yourself and your clients in complex corporate environments, and then knowing how and when to use the ICF ethics hotline. You may not have known that there was an ethics hotline. You may not have known that there was an ethics board. But when I was an internal coach, and I realized I was the most experienced coach in my organization and understanding how to handle things. Even when someone would pass me in the hall and they would tell me something that they likely thought was protected under the confidence of our coaching session, but I was also an employee of the company. So just navigating some of that complexity. Ethics is often not black and white. There's a lot of gray. And so just knowing what your supports are, knowing what your free supports are, in addition to mentors, supervisors, education, but then also, what's out there for you to support you as a coach, both at a company level and then also at an individual level. So when we think about the revisions for 2025, if you're not familiar with the old version, as the new version was updated, core values were added in. So professionalism, collaboration, humanity, and equity, and looking at how are we as coaches, also as humans, also as part of the International Coaching Federation and that community, embodying and demonstrating that. There's an emphasis in this revision on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This is a very hot topic right now in 2025 in the United States, and people have varying different beliefs on this. But as part of the International Coaching Federation and as part of a global community of coaching, recognizing the identity of groups, treating people fairly, but also seeing that bias and systemic inequality exist. Even if those are things that are not intentional or you were not aware of, these are things impacting our clients. These are potentially impacting you. There's power dynamics and things like that. So these are in the ethics. This is revised. So one of the things to consider is as you look at these ethics, these may be different than your personal beliefs. You may be thrilled that this is inclusion, this is included and double clicked on. This may not be in alignment with you and what your state or country is saying is important. So it's important that we as coaches really look to, because we are pledged to these ethics and we are pledged to the revisions of these ethics, so that you really understand what's agreed to and what your responsibility is as a coach, regardless of your beliefs. And, hopefully, as someone who's very passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, I'm hoping that you can see the value of this. But at the same time, part of diversity is that people come from different perspectives and have different beliefs about what's important. So making sure that we come together as coaches and how we cultivate trust and safety with our clients and make sure that we're supporting our clients. The ICF has put some intentional time in. There's commitments in there for the ICF, not just in the coaching session, but the whole community. So how we do good and also operate as coaches. There's additions related to technology and software systems. So that's new. And then there's also a point in there about many hats. So those of us who work in a business setting often mix consulting, management consulting, training, assessments, and other things like that in coaching. So knowing what we need to ethically disclose or not disclose has been updated. So looking a little bit deeper at DIB, it's moving beyond good intentions. I treat all people the same. You may treat all people the same. That's not what the world is like. There's systems and structures in place that have created different power, socioeconomic, different factors. Sometimes diversity is something you can see. Sometimes diversity is something that you can't see. So it's part of our responsibility as coaches to be looking at these systemic factors. So not just what our client is bringing to the table, but making sure that they feel safe enough to actually disclose what's happening, that we're truly supporting them in barriers that perhaps in removing barriers that perhaps they can't even see. So if you're not already comfortable with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work, this is a place to lean into with your chapter and from a continuing education perspective. I created the class Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Coaches because I was challenged by this after the death of George Floyd, because I had my personal beliefs, but how did that fit in with what I was supposed to say or not say as an ICF coach? So I integrate this in my education and classes because I feel strongly this is all of our responsibility. The ICF feels strongly that this is all of our responsibility. But I also know coaches that are practicing that have very strong opinions and don't feel that that these topics are particularly relevant or impacting their clients. So what we have to see as we come to the table and we're part of an international community is looking at what are the expectations of us as professionals and as professional coaches. If you have a brain, you have bias. It's our job to look at those bias and make sure, even if it's positive bias or confirmation bias or like me bias, that we're serving our clients. Sometimes we actually underserve the clients we relate to because we don't ask as many questions because we relate to their experience. And it's like, oh, I have a shortcut for you on that, or oh, food for thought on this. And we can start to mix that consulting in instead of staying in the coaching role. So the intent of this is not shame or blame or wherever you are. It's a matter of, in the spirit of continuing education, in the spirit of continuing to raise the bar for our clients, we also need to be raising the bar for ourselves and making sure that we're not just meeting the client where they are, but we're looking systemically on what may be holding them back and how we can be truly supporting them in their movement forward. A resource that Jason recommends is the Culture Map, Breaking Through Invisible Boundaries of Global Business. So food for thought, this is as part of the International Coaching Federation. There's so many perspectives on this. The International Coaching Federation has resources on this, chapters talk about this, but determining where you are, I mean, all coaching is current state to desired state. So determining where you are with this topic and then also figuring out where you're headed and how you can best serve your clients and your community is important. Another main topic, not surprisingly, is technology and artificial intelligence. So this was not necessary. Technology was there, but it's changed. And AI was not necessarily a factor the last time the ethics were revised. So there's some benefits here. Expanding access, our documentation has gotten more efficient, enhancing client engagement options. You can potentially have machines do things for you. But then there are some watch outs. Like, is it replacing coaching presence? Like, it's not necessarily just the fear of, like, oh, the bots are going to replace the coaches, because there's absolutely, we can use technology to benefit us. But are you not listening as closely because you know the notes will be summarized? Are your emails being auto summarized for you so you're not paying attention to the nuance? Are you using the free version of things? And so actually you and your clients are at risk of privacy or what they share being recycled into kind of AI or training and development. And are we diminishing human connection? So the point here is not to tell you what to use or not use or what to do or not do. It's that you need to be responsible. If and how are you using technology? If and how are you using AI? And then how is that impacting your practice, your clients? Do your contracts need to be revised or updated? When's the last time you read the terms of service? So we have a tendency to just like scroll to the bottom and click accept. So if you are using the free version of services, your client information is at risk. And the things that you have told clients are confidential. And the things that you are expected as a professional and as ICF ethics to keep in confidence may be exposed. So, it's time to take a look. It's our ethical responsibility to take a look. If you're using technology in your coaching, making sure that your client information is safe and that your information is also safe. So a couple terms to look out for: HIPAA compliant, GDRP, and SOC. So these are current as of March 2025, but things change all the time. So this is actually research that Jason did on providers that have these things. So the client information for the paid version of these things is likely in compliance. If it is not March of 2025 or April of 2025, you need to take a look at these things and the services that you're using with your clients and see how confidential they are or aren't. This is our responsibility as coaches. I know a lot of people use Claude and love Claude. I'm a big advocate for Calendly and DocuSign, and I'm coming to you live from Zoom. So these are things that we are using already, but their terms and services have changed. And how the terms and services have changed in whatever you're using, how are those protecting your clients? Because there are plenty of providers out there trying to get your business for technology and AI that aren't on this list. And a month from now, a year from now, this list will potentially change. So read, in food, they say read the labels. With technology, you need to read the fine print, and you may need to update your contracts and talk to your lawyer, talk to your clients to make sure that what they're sharing is as confidential as you believe it is. So we like to talk to people about this. It's not just, at Hawthorne Uni, we don't lecture. We look at, okay, what's happening? What technology are people using? What are you running into? What have you found? Have you gotten into hot water on this? How do we support each other as a community of coaches? So this is, these are slides from a presentation. So I left them as is. So you can kind of think about some of these questions yourself, but then also know if you want us to come to your chapter or group, we're happy to have these discussions. Or if you even just have coaches that you know and talk to, or want to talk to your mentor or your supervisor or people in your network, it's important to have these conversations in community. We need to share best practices. We need to share challenges. High tides raise all ships. So as we think about complexity, If you're doing any coaching with sponsors where the person paying for the coaching is not the person being coached, the confidentiality gets more complicated. What you're allowed to share or not share, what goes in your agreement is very essential. It's also very difficult because the sponsor is going to ask you how coaching is going. And that's not an unreasonable question. It's a question they would ask any other provider. But what you're bound to by the International Coaching Federation is a different standard. Then, though, that gets complicated because if you as a coach are subpoenaed, that confidentiality disappears. Now, I only know one coach who's been subpoenaed. I know hundreds of coaches, but someone, when we were presenting to ICFLA, raised their hand. They had been subpoenaed. They had a good experience. I know another coach who was a character witness. So, of the hundreds of coaches I know, the legal has only come up a little bit. But if, especially if I work with clients as a last resort before termination. So if one of those terminations ever then was legally contested, it's something to consider that my notes and my experience and my perspective is potentially something I would be called to in court. That adds an additional layer of complexity if you're an internal coach, because ultimately, while you're aligned with the International Coaching Federation, if you're also working with the company, and also a lot of times internal coaches may not be credentialed. So you may not have signed off on the ICF ethics. So this is, not just buyer beware for if you're working with a coach that's not credentialed, but also internal coaches are bound by potentially different agreements. And a lot of times those things aren't in writing. So this isn't to scare you off. It's to lead you towards education, lead you toward discussion, lead you towards mentors and supervisors and chapters and community to the ICF ethics board and the hotline so that you have support with these things and you know who you can talk to. Because, as we think about belonging in DEIB, if you belong to a community where you can get more information, some of this stuff isn't in white papers yet. It isn't in research yet. Like some of the things, especially with technology, it's so new. And when I spoke to my ethics professor and I spoke to someone from the ethics board when I was an internal coach, they were so helpful. They were so validating of my perspective. They gave me additional resources and insights and also validated me as an internal coach because there's not as much written down about internal coaching because it's private to the company. But that means we potentially have coaches out there who are feeling unsupported or lost because good intentions don't necessarily match with the ethical, legal, confidentiality, or in alignment with technology responsibilities we have. So this is not to sound punitive or scare you off. It's more to say that community and education and being able to discuss these things and establish best practices to make sure your contracts are up to date, to make sure your contracts match what you think that they match, that your technology is doing what you think it needs to be doing. This is not only a best practice now, as of April 1st, 2025, it's also your ethical responsibility as a coach. So we have discussions. So if you want us to come to your chapter, your group, one of the things we look at is case studies because we like everyone to just be actively thinking about these things. A lot of times education is too funneled one way. So at Hawthorne Union, we are big on breakout groups and case studies and discussions. So just thinking about how you disclose, how you sell, that is sometimes an ethical conundrum or challenge. If you're working internal in an organization or working with teams, I have gotten a number of referrals from coaches because they don't coach multiple levels in an organization. I love coaching multiple levels in an organization. It reminds me of when I was an internal coach, but at the same time, what if your client and a sponsor want different things and they're not talking about those things and you're locked in confidentiality? So we want safe spaces for you to think about these things, having an umbrella before it rains so you can talk about these things and establish where you stand in best practices. And then also from a diversity perspective, recognizing that, a lot of these areas are gray. So where you may draw the line on what you do in your practice is not necessarily where another coach would draw the line. And that's not necessarily an ethical violation. Some of it's just like where we draw boundaries, what technology we use or don't use, how much we hybridize coaching and consulting, what is or isn't in our contract, whether we work at multiple levels of organization. So while the ethics are revised and the work they have done to make them broader and simplify them is impressive, there's still a lot that we need to do in community to really make sure we're supporting each other as a profession for the high quality standards of our profession, for the ethics of our profession, but also that we're making sure that we're supporting the community. So, a couple things, real world, be intentional with your documentation and agreements. Based on the ICF ethic revisions, you may need to revise. You need to disclose software referrals and refund policies. This may have always been a best practice, but now there's actually an ethical obligation. So, taking a look at the ethics, taking a look at your contracts, taking a look at the terms and service of the software that you're using. Talking about boundaries, what is or isn't acceptable, what is or isn't acceptable to your clients, to the companies that you're working with, to you as a coach. And then also, we're going to have to revisit and we're going to have to clarify. The world has changed. People know what Chat GPT and Claude are now. And a couple years ago, they didn't know. And depending on when you're watching this video, those may be dated terms by the time that you watch this. So technology and the world and our global community is always changing and shifting and moving. So we need to be talking about these things. We need to revisit them as coaches, revisit them as best practices, and you also may need to have these conversations with your clients. The ethics assist line, I recommend this. I reached out to someone on the ethics board. They were very helpful. When Jason and I were giving this presentation to ICF Los Angeles, volunteers from the ethics board came in and they answered questions. So these are amazing volunteers that are gifting their time. They're passionate about ethics. You can also fill out a form. If you are not a coach and have a concern, or a coach with a concern, just knowing that there's a safe space to go for you to make sure that these things are looked into, and then also for you to have that development and support. We like to create space to share examples, sharing examples of contracts and agreements, things that work, things that didn't work. It can be very easy to be siloed. Sometimes people don't share because they don't want to get it wrong. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you're so focused on your business, it can be difficult to make time to focus on learning or focus on community. But when we come together in community and we can share and learn from each other, I'm happy to share what worked. I'm happy to share what doesn't work. That's why Hawthorne Union is a continuing education and also now a new coach training provider. So just know that if you are a coach and don't have community, whether that's online or in person, I really encourage you to tap into resources and the insight. There's plenty of stuff out there that you can pay for, and there's plenty of stuff out there for free. So make sure that you're getting support. If you're actually revising a contract and an agreement, and with a lawyer, you're going to pay more money for that. But at the same time, the amount paid up front to protect yourself from an ethical liability, confidentiality, and just professional perspective is really important. So encourage you to bring up, if this has brought up questions or concerns, or as you read over the ethics, you have questions and concerns, reach out to your community, reach out to your mentors, the people from your training program, your supervisors, hop into a continuing education class or hop into a chapter meeting. Chapters, ICF chapters were likely based on and founded from when we all met in person. But as a member of ICF Los Angeles, we have people from all over the world, and it's just a great space where people come together. So know that you're not alone, and also you don't have to figure this out all by yourself, especially as it changes. So we make time and space for Q&A. Jason's knowledge and passion on ethics is very impressive. So I do recommend, he teaches gray areas ethics for coaches. That's 6 ethics credits if you want to join us at Hawthorne Union for continuing ed. We do mentoring and supervision. We're here for you, part of your coach community. We also have resources, free resources like business building strategies. You're watching this on YouTube, so we have information on YouTube. And then actually, based on some of the gaps we saw in some of these ethics and how coaches are contracting and how coaches are making money and being able to engage in a coach community in an interactive space, we actually created a new coach training. So Hawthorne Union has a lot of offerings, both free and paid. So check out our resource page, YouTube. We're happy to be part of your community. So I hope that this was helpful. Take a look at those revised ethics either on the resource page or once they're available through the ICF. Reach out and lean into your community. If there's ways we can support you at Hawthorne Union, let us know. Happy coaching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your clients. Thanks.